الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وشفيعنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي ما بعد. Respected elders, dear brothers and sisters, my young friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. As we gather here today, my brothers and sisters, most homes are empty of children. Most of our children, except for the ones who are here, are in schools at this moment. Each day, most children are spending from anywhere from 1/3 to 1/4 of their day at school. Now it's been over a month since school began, so maybe it's a good time to take a step back, as now, we've gotten used to the routines and the schedules. It's a good time to take a step back and reflect upon our children, our youth, and their future. This issue is relevant to all people, actually, but especially to us as Muslims, because our children are collectively the future of this ummah. Right? When we think about the state of the ummah, when we think about the state of Islam, when we think about how our teachings that have been passed down to us will carry forward, it all depends on our children. Right? So our children are essentially the future of the ummah. So whether you have children or not, or whether you're a parent, you're a grandparent, or you have no children in the picture yet, this is important for all of us to know. For whenever the time comes when we are in a situation where we have children in our lives. And also with regards to our interactions with other Muslim children. Now, all parents, grandparents want their children to be successful. Everyone agrees. If we did a poll and we said, okay, who wants their grandchild to be successful? I am almost certain that 100% of people will say that yes, we want our children and our grandchildren to be successful. But the question is, what does that success look like? How do we define that success? And what is, when we think of our children being successful, what do we envision? What do we see? What do we imagine? So most people, or many people, will say that we want our children to be happy, of course. We want them to have a stable life, a good income. Perhaps we have a specific profession in mind or a specific role for them. We want them to have a happy marriage. We want them to own a home, which are all, very legitimate desires, right, for our children. So all of these things are great. But when we say these things, we are limiting our scope of success for our children to this world, which is part of the equation, but it's not the full equation. The believing parent's vision needs to go beyond this world. So what do you want to see for your child, for your grandchildren in the hereafter? How do you want to see them on the day of judgment? Where do you want their ultimate abode to be? And the greatest measure of success is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in Surah Ali Imran, when Allah Azza wa Jal says, كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَائِقَةُ الْمَوْتِ, every soul shall taste death. وَإِنَّمَا تُوَفَّوْنَ أُجُورَكُمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ, and you will only receive your full reward on the day of Qiyamah, on the day of judgment. فَمَنْ زُحْزِحَ عَنِ النَّارِ وَأُدْخِلَ الْجَنَّةَ فَقَدْ فَازَ, whoever is spared from the nar, from the fire, and is admitted into Jannah, is admitted into paradise, will indeed triumph. وَمَا الْحَيَاةُ الدُّنْيَا إِلَّا مَتَاعُ الْغُرُورِ, whereas the life of this world is no more than a delusion of enjoyment. It is temporary. It is something which is not everlasting. It is here, it is now, and we are in it, but we are not going to be here forever, and it is not going to last forever. So this is when ultimate success will become apparent. That is the day and that is the time when we will truly know and recognize who really was successful and who was not. So therefore, our vision, my brothers and sisters, must extend beyond the next 70 or so years to the hereafter. That's not to say that the 70 years should not be part of the vision. Of course, it has to be part of the vision. But the vision doesn't end at 50, 60, 70 years. The vision extends into the hereafter. And our choices then must reflect that vision, right? Choices that can help set up our children for a decent, respectable life in this world and the best life in the hereafter, and not the other way around. Why do I say that? Because a lot of times, the stark truth, reality is that our choices are prioritizing the temporary over the permanent. What's happening? Our choices are prioritizing the temporary over the permanent. That's not to say that we should not be concerned about the temporary, right? Which is the life of this world. Of course, we should be, right? There's no discussion there. I'm not suggesting that we should not. But we have to get our priorities straight, and we have to get our priorities right. That what is everlasting is certainly more important and more deserving of being a priority than that which is temporary. And we all understand this when we think about it logically. We should be making dua for this, of course, and make it a priority practically. Because you know what? Our choices, our decisions send implicit messages about our priorities that our children are able to pick up. The choices that we make, our children are able to read that. Even if we're saying one thing, but our choices and our decisions are sending a contradictory message, children are smart, and they'll pick that up. And one of the first things that children, and especially youth, are able to smell and pick up, and I probably mentioned this before, is hypocrisy. That's one of the first things they'll be able to pick up when there's a mismatch. So you say one thing, right? But your actions, your choices, say something else. So let's be very careful about that as parents, right? You tell the child, to recite Quran. It's so important to recite Quran. It's so important to recite Quran. You must recite Quran every day, right? But when the choice comes to enroll your child into a Quran program or some other program, then the other program takes priority. So what's the message did you just send to your child? The Quran is really not that important, right? You want to make sure that they don't miss any days of school, Monday to Friday. But then when it's time for evening or weekend school, you have a lax attitude. What does that say? Right. So children are able to read these messages. Each child, my brothers and sisters, is built, including ourselves when we were born, upon the fitrah. The natural disposition. كُلُّ مَوْلُودٍ يُولَدُ عَلَى الْفِطْرَةِ is the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. The natural disposition to recognize and believe, recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and to believe Him. That is the default setting of every single human being that is born. It is the parents who change that. That is what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has told us. Right? It's like a device that you buy, right? Or when you do a factory reset, right? You've got the default settings, right? Everything is designed, is set up to work the way it is intended to work. But then you go around, downloading various types of apps and software and all types of stuff that messes up your device, right? Not the hardware, but the software, right? It starts eating up all the memory and then downloading all this type, malware and all this other stuff, right? So that's the same example for human beings and for our children. The challenge is, it's sort of like this, that we are trying to grow dates and mangoes in a climate that is not really well suited for such fruits. Somebody says, I want to have a mango tree in my backyard here in Ottawa. Is it going to happen? Not in the backyard, right? Maybe, I don't know if you can somehow make it grow inside, right? And you have a system set up for it and you give it the temperature and everything that it needs, but otherwise it's not going to happen, right? Or you'll get the tree, but you won't get the fruit, right? So this means, my brothers and sisters, that we need to manage a few things. So number one, the environment, what our children are taking in, and the length of exposure, okay? And I keep saying children, but actually this applies to adults as well. But especially because we are focusing on children, I say children and youth, but really it's for all of us, right? So number one, the environment, right? The environment of the home is important, but the environment of the school is also an important consideration, right? Because like I said in the beginning, our children are spending a quarter to one third of their day at school. So the environment of the home, of the school, of your social circle, right? Of your family social circle, of the friends that they're hanging out with, right? And we're especially thinking about manners, character, priorities, right? How are those things like? You know, I was thinking recently that, mashallah, there is a growing number of Muslims in the city, in the community, alhamdulillah. This is wonderful. In schools, mashallah, you go to some schools, right? It's like one of the teachers was telling me, in the French system, like one of the classes is like 70% Muslim, right? So, mashallah, tabarakallah, like there's a large number of Muslims. The numbers are not the issue. But here's the question, that if we have a growing number of Muslims in the community, in schools, in universities, what effect should that be having? What effect should that be having on the overall environment? Right? You would think that, I was talking about drugs last week, that drug use should be down. Alcoholism should be down. Women should be feeling more safer and respected, because the Muslim man will even respect women with his eyes, right? Because that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has taught us. Crime should be down. Gang activity should be down, right? All of these things should be going down as the number of Muslims increases, right? And if that is not happening, then the question is why? Why is it not happening? Why is it that it seems, or the perception is that when the number of Muslims increases, that the problems also increase? It should be the opposite. And if it's not the opposite, why is it not the opposite? So the environment is extremely important, and it starts with the home and the people that we choose to hang out with. So that's number one, managing the environment. Second, two, what they, our children, and we watch and listen to, and that we expose ourselves to. Whether this is mainstream media, whether it's on the internet, whether it's movies or shows or music or anashid or Quran recitation you're listening to, what are you exposing your children to? And a lot of this starts when it's young. The problem is that when the foundation is not set well, and then the building starts being crooked, that's when a lot of times we realize, the building is going sideways. It's not going the way it should be. And then we say, okay, well, let's try to fix this. And it's so much harder to fix it afterwards, after the fact. So a lot of this advice and a lot of these discussions need to happen when children are young, and the focus starts there. Because if you build the foundation right, then it becomes a lot easier for the rest of the building to also be upright and to be straight. That's not to say you can't have mishaps and you can't have instances where things still go sideways. It's possible. But it's a lot easier to start off when children are young and when they're fresh. So creating or curating their taste according to what is appropriate in terms of exposure. And thirdly, examining how long they are exposed in an unhealthy environment and how to increase healthy exposure. Right, so these are the things that we primarily need to manage, and like I said, we start young so that we build a strong and correct foundation. The more we can limit unhealthy exposure, which is spiritually unhealthy, the better, of course. Right? Just like you wouldn't want to be in a room that's filled with toxins, that's filled with germs, that has poor ventilation. As we know, during COVID, there's a lot of focus on ventilation, right? So you don't want to be in that environment because it's harmful for your health, physically. Similarly, the environment matters, spiritually, right? If you're putting your child or yourself in an environment that's filled with filth, that's filled with spiritual filth, that has all types of things that are harmful, then it's going to have an effect, right? So how can we increase the healthy exposure and reduce the unhealthy exposure? One way to do that for children is through enrollment in full-time Islamic schools. But this is not possible for everyone. I know that. So let us figure out what exposure is not required, it's extra, and it can be easily controlled, then go ahead and do it, right? So you look at all the exposure that your child is getting, or that you're getting, and see, okay, how much of it is necessary, how much of it is mandatory or you can't control, how much of it can you actually control? And the ones that you can control, absolutely go ahead and control it in a healthy manner. Figure out what exposure is required and which cannot be easily controlled, and then you say, okay, this is something that I cannot really fully control, so it is what it is, but I can try to counteract the negative impacts and effects that might be occurring within. There are, of course, options for structured programs. So, for example, as I mentioned, evening and weekend schools. Alhamdulillah, here we have a number of activities that happen at the masjid. Inshallah, there's a play group. Mothers and children who are here right now, mashallah, and also on Sundays now, twice a week, mashallah, which is excellent. We have children's circle this evening, inshallah, after Maghrib. So we have, structured programs and classes, and of course many other activities happening in other masajid and other institutions, wonderful programs, mashallah, across the city. And so there's the structured options that we have, but then we also have the unstructured, right, which is at home, through normal interactions, right, the things that we choose to talk about, right. One of my favorite, and I've mentioned this before, is when I'm going to drop off kids at school, right, in the morning. For those who have a bit of a commute, that's a wonderful time to either talk about something healthy, something useful, something that's going to get them to think and get them to learn something positive about our religion, about our faith, or even listening to various khutbahs and lectures from various speakers and scholars, and just putting it on in the car, especially for youth, right? Well, maybe they don't want to listen to it, maybe they're bored or whatever, right? But at the end of the day, it's they're hearing it, right? And inshallah, it's going to have some effect. So at home, finding other opportunities through normal interactions, through modeling behavior, right? Of course, the connection with the masjid. And it's so important to establish a culture within the family, within the home, and within the masjid as well. Within the masjid as well, right? So we have a common and healthy culture, because when we have a situation where the dominant culture or things that are happening are not very healthy, then there has to be an alternative culture. You can't just fully, isolate yourself and not have, any alternatives. So there has to be an alternative culture, and the masjid is one of the places where we can provide that alternative culture, but it has to be positive and it has to be healthy. MashaAllah, I'm very pleased to learn that Salatul Jum'ah has started, or has restarted at a number of public schools, alhamdulillah. And as the days get shorter and the prayer times get closer together, it is now more important than ever to help our children, our youth, get organized at school. Create MSAs together, so that they can get access to prayer space in schools, and that they're able to organize Salatul Jum'ah. Sheikh Hisham Al-Aghbari is working on this. Alhamdulillah, Jazakumullah khair. So please contact him if you'd like Salatul Jum'ah, or if you'd like support for Salatul Jum'ah at your child's secondary school, inshallah. As you know, the municipal and school board elections are also coming up. And of course, it's important to vote. We've talked about that numerous times, that we must be fair and just, and give a fair chance to everyone, and understand the platforms and get to know the candidates before we make our choices. But along with the municipal elections is also the school board trustee elections as well. So engage with school board trustee candidates to share your concerns and views about what is happening in school. There's a great opportunity to do that right now. The goal, my brothers and sisters, is to stay upon Sirat al-Mustaqim for ourselves and our future generations, to protect them against the fire, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran very clearly, Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu, qu anfusakum wa ahlikum nara. So that is what our objective is. But remember that there are no guarantees. There are no guarantees. Our job as parents is to try our best to guide. And that is what we are accountable for, not the results. Always remember, we are accountable for our intention and effort in all matters, not the results, because the results are in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So try your reasonable best to guide your children and to make the right choices, and leave for Allah the rest. Even the most pious of people have had children who have disobeyed, who have rejected Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, And the worst of the people have had the best of children, right? Because at the end, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who guides, right? When we look at the example of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, right? He reasoned, right, with his son. He pleaded with him to no avail, right? His son thought that he was smarter than his father, and he was destroyed, right? But that is not an abdication of responsibility of parents, right? The goal is to guide them to be a humble servant of Allah who is able to live a life in the most responsible and productive way as possible. And then there are some children, right, or some children will be like Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam, right, where when his father tells him, right, Sayyidina Ibrahim alayhi salam tells him about the dream he has that he's going to sacrifice him. Ya abati fa'al ma tu'mar. Oh my father, my dear father, do as you have been commanded. Right? Some children will be like the children of Sayyidina Yaqub alayhi salam. Others like the son of Nuh alayhi salam. Right? Sometimes children will rebel in their teens. But most of the time, if the foundation is strong, inshaAllah, they will come back. InshaAllah. So during those turbulent years, keep the door open, give them love, and maintain whatever positive influence you're able to maintain, and make effort, make a lot of dua. Dua of the parents is very, very powerful. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to protect our children and our youth. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make them steadfast upon Iman. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make them and us lighthouses of Iman and Ihsan, living embodiments of the Quran and the Sunnah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rectify our state and to forgive us for our shortcomings. Ameen. Wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. So this is the municipal election time. We just done with the provincial election, but now it's a municipal election time. And